All right, we're talking about the incompetent administration that now has the biggest problem of its career in front of the American people. Now, there are always going to be 1 out of 3 who say that they're doing no wrong. These are the worshipers who will say no matter what they do, it's right. We expect that from both sides. We had that with Bush, that even when he was wrong, he was right. And we have it right now from New York City, apparently. David in New York, WOR calls. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm just calling to say I think the president is doing the best he can. And
Well, see, that's the problem. He is doing the best he can. That's exactly my point.
I'm just saying we ought to support him.
But you hear what I just said? He's doing the best he can, but he's not up to the job, David.
I think he is. I think he...
Well, of course you would think he is, because you're one of the progressives who believes he can do no harm and that he walks on water, correct?
Progressives in Brooklyn.
That's right. So in other words, because you finally have a socialist in power, he can do no harm, right?
No socialist in power. I think he's a very capable man, and that kind of...
Then why did it take him 38 days to do anything?
He was explaining that there were limits to by statute to his time.
No, there aren't. He said he has absolute power. He said that at West Point the other day. Do you know that some of his most ardent cheerleaders, including James Carville, a lifetime liberal Democrat, were screaming that it's been 38 days without an administration solution and it's not acceptable? How can you say that even they believe it's true? It's not true.
Mr. Savage, you're familiar with the chaos principle.
No, please don't change the argument. I'm not in one of your classrooms or in one of your old courtrooms, my friend. Why don't you just make your statement? I just made a statement that you didn't want to respond to. Even his most ardent supporters like James Carville are pissed off that it took him 38 days without a solution. So don't say it's me saying it. Everyone's saying it except you.
There's always, in a crisis like this, second guessers. After the fact, everyone says he should have done this, he should have done that.
Why did it take him 12 days to show up in the region?
I don't think his showing up mattered. He has subordinates, and he can...
Well, but you and the other Democrats criticized Bush for waiting 4 days after Katrina to go to New Orleans. Movies were written about incompetent, stupid Bush. What did you have to say about Bush that he didn't go to Katrina to New Orleans for 4 days? I'm sure you jumped all over him, correct? Or did you have an excuse that it was based on some kind of chaos?
No, Katrina was quite different, as I'm sure you know.
It was different. Why? Because white men blew up the levees?
No. Very funny. No.
Well, but that's what some of the black activists said. They even made movies about it. You know that, don't you?
No, I don't, but I can't help what the black activists say.
I'm just putting wires into your circuitry to see where you're coming from. All right, what about the containment strategy of barrier berms? You're familiar with it by now, as we all are, correct?
Yes, and he responded to that.
Well, I'm asking a question. We all know what a barrier berm is, right?
I did.
These are temporary sand islands that block the flow of oil into fragile wetlands and marshes, right? And yet berm construction requires approval from the Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Do you happen to know when Louisiana officials asked for permission to build these berms, on what date?
I'm sure it was much earlier.
May 11th. And do you know when they got the answer?
But his response was...
They asked on May 11th. Today is May 27th. When did they get an answer from the Obama administration as to whether they could build the berms?
The president responded by saying...
You're not answering me. When did they get an answer whether they could build the berms or not?
I don't know, but I'm going to answer you right now.
Well, the answer is they didn't get one yet. They only asked on May 11th. Today's May 27th. No answer yet. They're conducting a review, an environmental review, as the oil is killing the birds and the clams and the shrimp.
You don't put them just anywhere. Apparently, you have to...
Well, what, did you have to go to a review note for that answer? That took you a little while for a guy quick on the uptake.
No,
What do you mean you don't just put them anywhere? You're assuming that Louisiana officials who live in the area don't know where to put them? That only some pinhead from Washington will know where to build a berm? Some guy from Harvard who 4 years ago was pursuing civil rights cases is suddenly an expert on the bayou and an expert on building a berm? But the guy in Louisiana who grew up with sand in his gills doesn't know how to build one?
The issue was not how to build one, it was where to put them. And how.
That's correct. Of course that's correct. But they didn't even give him an answer on that.
But I'll put it this way. I've had enough...
Well, let's put it to you this way. How about the dispersants that BP is using? Do you want to talk about that?
I don't know anything about them, other than just what I heard on the radio.
All right. Well, let's talk about it without getting angry. The federal government was not even quick on the question of what dispersant to use. Those are chemicals that are used to break up the oil and speed up the evaporation from the surface of the water. On May 8th, Louisiana sent a letter to BP and the EPA begging BP, saying don't use dispersants below the surface of the water because subsurface use of dispersants will keep oil slicks from forming. And when it doesn't come to the surface to evaporate, the oil will linger below, get into underwater currents, and put at risk fisheries that supply a third of America's seafood. Do you know what happened? On May 13th, the EPA overruled the state of Louisiana and permitted BP to use dispersants 4,000 feet below the surface. And then a week later, after 55... I'll continue when I come back. David, thanks for listening.